Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the mining scanner display. The numbers were not good. 3 weeks of searching through the asteroid belt near Kepler 442, and his cargo hold was still mostly empty. The Frontier. Dawn was a small ship, built for one-man mining operations, but even small ships needed fuel and supplies. He pushed back from the control panel and stretched his arms above his head. The cramped cockpit felt smaller every day. Jake was 32 years old with brown hair that stuck up in odd directions and hands that were always dirty from fixing something on his ship. He had been mining asteroids for 8 years, since he graduated from engineering school with more debt than job prospects. The work was lonely but honest. Find rocks with valuable metals, break them apart, sell the ore at the nearest station. It was not glamorous, but it paid the bills and let him work alone. Jake had always preferred machines to people anyway. Machines made sense. They broke down, for logical reasons, and could be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. He was about to start the engines and move to a new sector when something appeared on his proximity sensors. Jake frowned and tapped the screen. The display showed a large object about 2 kilometers away, drifting slowly through space. It was too big to be an asteroid, and the wrong shape besides. Jake adjusted his sensors and got a clearer picture. The object was definitely artificial. It looked like a ship, but not like any human design he had ever seen. The hull was smooth and curved, almost organic-looking, with strange markings along its sides. It was dark, except for a few dim lights that flickered weakly. His first thought was to contact the authorities. First contact with alien species was supposed to go through official channels. There were protocols and procedures. Scientists and diplomats were supposed to handle these things, not freelance miners with second-hand ships. But the nearest human outpost was 6 days away, and the alien ship looked damaged. Those flickering lights could be emergency beacons. If there was someone alive in there, they might not have 6 days to wait for help. Jake made his decision quickly, the way he always did. He fired up the engines and moved closer to the strange ship. As the Frontier Dawn approached, Jake could see the damage more clearly. Large sections of the alien hull were scarred and blackened. Pieces of debris floated around the ship like a metal cloud. Whatever had happened here, it had been violent. Jake activated his communication system and tried broadcasting on several frequencies. He used standard greeting protocols, mathematical sequences, even simple audio patterns. Nothing came back, except static. He maneuvered his ship until he was floating just 50 meters from the alien vessel. Through his cockpit window, he could see into some of the damaged sections. The interior was dark, but he thought he saw movement in one of the chambers. Jake put on his environmental suit and prepared to leave his ship. The suit was old and patched in several places, but it would keep him alive in vacuum. He clipped a tool belt around his waist and grabbed a portable air tank and medical kit from his emergency supplies. The jump between ships was nerve-wracking. Jake had done plenty of spacewalks, but never to board an unknown alien vessel. His magnetic boots clanked against the strange hull as he found what looked like an airlock. The alien door was sealed, but his cutting torch made quick work of the damaged metal. Inside, the ship was a maze of curved corridors and odd angles. The air was thin but breathable according to his suit sensors. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. Jake moved carefully, calling out in case anyone could hear him. He found the alien in what looked like a control room. The creature was slumped over a console, unconscious but still breathing. Jake had never seen anything like it. The being was roughly humanoid, but taller and thinner than any human. Its skin was pale blue-gray, and it had 4 arms instead of 2. Most striking were its eyes, which were large and completely black. The alien was badly injured. Jake could see burns on its arms and a deep cut across its chest that was still bleeding a thick, dark fluid. Without thinking, Jake opened his medical kit and got to work. He had no idea if human medical supplies would help an alien, but bleeding was bleeding. Jake cleaned the wounds as best he could and applied pressure bandages. He gave the creature water from his emergency supply and tried to make it comfortable. The alien stirred after a few minutes. Those large black eyes opened and focused on Jake with obvious confusion. It tried to sit up, but Jake gently pushed it back down. "Easy there," Jake said. knowing the creature could not understand him but hoping his tone would be reassuring. "You are hurt pretty bad. Just rest." The alien spoke, but the words were like nothing Jake had ever heard. The sounds were musical, but sharp like wind chimes made of metal. Jake shook his head and pointed to himself. "Jake," he said clearly. "My name is Jake." The alien seemed to understand. It pointed to itself with one of its 4 hands and made a series of sounds. Jake tried to repeat them but failed completely. The alien made what might have been a laugh and tried again, slower this time. "Veltar," Jake said finally, getting something close to the right pronunciation. The alien nodded, which was apparently universal. Over the next several hours, Jake did what he could for his unexpected patient. He shared his food and water, cleaned and rebandaged the wounds, and tried to communicate using gestures and simple drawings. Veltar was clearly intelligent and seemed grateful for the help. Jake explored more of the damaged ship and found the problem. The main power core had been damaged in whatever attack had crippled the vessel. With his engineering background, Jake was able to jury-rig a temporary repair using parts from his own ship. It was not pretty, but it would give Veltar enough power to send a distress signal to his own people. When the repairs were finished, Veltar insisted on showing Jake something. The alien led him to a chamber filled with strange equipment and pulled out a small crystalline device about the size of a human thumb. The crystal was perfectly clear and seemed to glow with its own internal light. Veltar pressed the device into Jake's hand and spoke urgently in his musical language. Jake could not understand the words, but the meaning seemed important. When Jake tried to give the crystal back, Veltar refused and pushed Jake's hand away. The alien pointed to the device, then to Jake, then made a gesture that looked like someone calling for help. Jake thought he understood. If he ever needed assistance, he should use the crystal somehow. Jake wanted to refuse the gift. He had not helped Veltar for any reward. It had just been the right thing to do. But the alien seemed so insistent that Jake finally nodded and put the crystal in his pocket. 2 days later, a sleek alien ship arrived to rescue Veltar. Jake watched from his cockpit as the beings transferred their injured comrade to their vessel. Before leaving, Veltar appeared on Jake's communication screen one last time. The alien placed his 4 hands over his heart and bowed deeply. Jake awkwardly returned the gesture. Then the alien ship was gone, leaving Jake alone in the asteroid belt with his half-empty cargo hold and a strange crystal in his pocket. He stared at the device for a long moment, then put it away and got back to work. He had mining to do and bills to pay. Jake Morrison had no idea that he had just changed the course of galactic history. He only knew that he had met someone who needed help, and he had done what he could. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Fleet Commander Veltar Kess stood before the High Council of Zephyr Prime, his 4 arms held straight at his sides in the formal position of truth-telling. The great hall was carved from a single piece of black stone, and hundreds of his people filled the curved benches that rose up from the speaking floor. Their large black eyes watched him with intense interest. "The human saved my life without question or hesitation," Veltar said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "He had no knowledge of our people, no understanding of our customs, yet he risked his own safety to aid a stranger." Elder Kesthai, the oldest member of the council, leaned forward in her seat. Her skin was more gray than blue, marked with the ritual scars that showed her long years of service. "You speak of honor debt, Commander. This is a serious matter. Are you certain this alien understood nothing of our ways?" "I am certain, Elder. The human acted from pure compassion. When I offered him salvage rights to my vessel, he refused. When I tried to give him valuable metals from my cargo hold, he would not accept them. He wanted nothing in return for his kindness." A murmur ran through the assembled Zephyrians. In their culture, such selfless behavior was the highest form of nobility. To help a stranger without expecting reward was considered almost sacred. "Elder," Morven spoke next, his voice deep and thoughtful. "If this is true, then we have encountered something remarkable. Tell us more about these humans, Commander." Veltar activated a holographic display that showed images he had recorded during his time on Jake's ship. The Zephyrians watched with fascination as they saw the cramped quarters of the mining vessel, the simple tools Jake had used to repair the power core, and the basic medical supplies he had shared. They appear to be a young species, Veltar continued. Their technology is primitive compared to ours, but they are clever and resourceful. The human Jake Morrison solved my power core problem with materials that should not have worked. His engineering skills were impressive. And his character? Asked Elder Kessathai. Extraordinary. He worked for hours to help me, sharing his food and water even though his own supplies were limited. He stayed with me when he could have simply sent a distress signal and left. When I gave him the debt marker, he seemed confused by the concept of being owed anything for his actions. The council fell silent as they considered this information. Finally, Elder Morven stood up, his great height making him visible throughout the chamber. "The debt is real and binding," he declared. "Commander Veltar Kess was saved by the human Jake Morrison through an act of pure honor. This debt extends to all of humanity, for the human acted not just as an individual, but as a representative of his species." The other council members voiced their agreement. Elder Kestai raised her hand for silence. "But we must learn more about these humans before we can properly honor this debt. Commander Veltar, you will establish a long-range observation program. Study their worlds, their culture, their nature. We must understand what kind of people we are now bound to protect." Over the following month, Zephyrian scout ships began appearing at the edges of human space. They were careful to remain hidden, using advanced cloaking technology to observe without being detected. What they saw amazed them. Captain Rex Tar commanded one of these scout vessels. His reports to the High Council painted a picture of humanity that seemed almost too good to believe. He watched human rescue ships risk their lives to save stranded vessels, regardless of which nation or corporation the people belonged to. He observed human medical teams working in disaster zones, helping anyone who needed aid. Most impressive to the Zephyrians were the small acts of kindness they witnessed. Humans helping elderly strangers cross busy streets, store workers staying late to help confused customers, children sharing their food with hungry animals. It seemed that Jake Morrison's compassion was not unique, but part of something larger in human nature. "They have a saying," Rextar reported during one council session. "They call it the Golden Rule, treat others as you would want to be treated. This principle appears throughout their cultures and religions." Meanwhile, Jake Morrison had returned to Earth and was trying to build a normal life. He had sold his mining operation and used the money to buy a small apartment in Luna City, the moon's main settlement. He found work as an engineer at the Luna shipyards, designing life support systems for deep space vessels. Jake was good at his job. His experience in space had taught him what systems really mattered when you were far from help. He designed air recyclers that were nearly impossible to break, and water purifiers that could work with the dirtiest ice. His colleagues respected his practical approach to engineering problems. It was at the shipyards that Jake met Lisa Carter. She was a pilot who tested the ships he helped design. Lisa was smart and funny, with red hair and green eyes that seemed to see right through any nonsense. She was also one of the few people who could make Jake laugh when he was being too serious about his work. Their first date was a disaster. Jake was so nervous that he spilled coffee on his shirt, forgot where he had parked his car, and accidentally took Lisa to a restaurant that had been closed for renovation. But Lisa found his awkwardness charming, and when he finally relaxed, they talked for hours about space travel, engineering challenges, and their dreams for the future. They were married 2 years later in a small ceremony attended by friends from the shipyards. Jake's parents had died when he was young, and Lisa's family lived on Earth, so their wedding was simple but happy. Jake kept the crystal device Veltar had given him in a drawer in their apartment, sometimes taking it out to look at it and remember his strange encounter in the asteroid belt. Lisa knew about Jake's meeting with the alien, and she often teased him about his space friend. She suggested they should try to contact Veltar someday, maybe invite him for dinner. Jake always laughed and said that aliens probably had better things to do than visit old friends. What Jake did not know was that the Zephyrians were watching over human space like invisible guardians. When pirates attacked the mining station at Ceres, a Zephyrian battlecruiser appeared from nowhere and drove them off before disappearing again. The human authorities assumed It was a new type of automated defense system. When the exploration, ship New Horizons encountered a dangerous ion storm near Proxima Centauri, they found that someone had cleared a safe path through the worst of the radiation. The crew reported strange sensor readings but could not identify what had helped them. Trade routes that should have been dangerous became mysteriously safe. Human colonies on the frontier found that hostile wildlife seemed to avoid their settlements. Supply ships arrived on schedule even when they should have been delayed by mechanical problems or bad weather. Humanity was prospering in ways they did not fully understand. Their expansion into space was going more smoothly than anyone had expected. Scientists and politicians took credit for careful planning and good luck, never realizing that they had powerful friends watching from the shadows. The Zephyrians were not the only ones taking notice. Word of the human debt spread to other species that traded with Zephyr Prime. The story of Jake Morrison's kindness became a legend that was told across the galaxy. Some alien cultures began studying human behavior, curious about a species that could produce such unexpected compassion. Back on Luna, Jake and Lisa were building their life together. Lisa was pregnant with their first child, and Jake spent his evenings designing a nursery and reading books about parenthood. He had no idea that his name was spoken with respect in councils across the galaxy, or that his simple act of kindness years earlier had made humanity famous among the stars. The crystal device sat forgotten in its drawer, waiting for the day when Jake Morrison would need to call upon the greatest debt in galactic history. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The red dots representing enemy ships seemed to fill the entire screen. 237 vessels of unknown design were approaching the solar system at high speed. Intelligence reports suggested each ship was larger and better armed than anything in the human fleet. "Time to contact?" Blake asked her navigation officer. 18 hours at current speed, Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Pete Walsh replied, his voice tight with stress. "They are not responding to any communication attempts." Blake nodded grimly. She was 54 years old and had served in the Space Navy for 32 years. She had fought pirates, handled first contact situations with 3 different alien species, and commanded fleets in war games. But nothing had prepared her for this. The alien fleet had appeared at the edge of the solar system 3 days ago. Their ships were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports and armor plating. They moved in perfect formation, ignoring all attempts at communication. Long-range scans showed no signs of peaceful intent. "What do we know about them?" Blake asked. Her intelligence officer, Commander Rita Stone, pulled up a new display. "They call themselves the Hegemony, Admiral. Our deep space listening posts picked up some of their transmissions. From what we can translate, they seem to be a confederation of conquered species led by something called the Hierarchy." "Conquered species?" "Yes, Admiral. Near as we can tell, the Hegemony finds young civilizations and either absorbs them or destroys them. They have been expanding across this part of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Blake felt a chill run down her spine. "And now they have found us." The human defense fleet was impressive by human standards. 43 ships including battlecruisers, destroyers, and support vessels. The newest and most advanced spacecraft humanity had ever built. But against more than 200 enemy ships, it would not be enough. "Orders, Admiral?" asked her tactical officer. "Form up the fleet in defensive formation around Earth. Send the evacuation signal to all colonies and space stations. If we cannot stop them here, we need to buy time for people to escape." But Blake knew there was nowhere to run. The Hegemony ships were faster than anything humans had built. Even if some people escaped Earth, the aliens would hunt them down, eventually. On Luna, Jake Morrison was in his workshop when the emergency broadcasts began. He was 51 years old now, with gray streaks in his brown hair and lines around his eyes from years of squinting at engineering displays. His daughter, Amy, was 19 and studying to be a pilot like her mother. His son Danny was 16 and wanted to follow in his father's footsteps as an engineer. The family gathered around their communication screen as President Martinez addressed the nation. The president's face was grim as she explained the situation. An alien fleet was approaching Earth with hostile intent. All available military forces were being mobilized. Citizens should remain calm and follow evacuation procedures if ordered. How bad is it, Dad? Amy asked. She had inherited her mother's red hair, but her father's serious nature. Jake looked at the tactical display being shown on the news. He had spent enough years in space to understand what the numbers meant. It is very bad, sweetheart. Lisa came to stand beside him, her hand finding his. They had been married for 18 years now, and she could read his expressions better than anyone. What are you thinking? I am thinking about that alien I helped all those years ago. Veltar. I wonder if his people know what is happening here. The crystal thing? Danny asked. You still have it, right? Jake nodded. The crystal device was still in his desk drawer, exactly where he had put it decades ago. Sometimes he would take it out and look at it, wondering what had become of Veltar and whether they would ever meet again. Do you think it actually does something? Lisa asked. I do not know. Veltar seemed to think it was important. But that was so long ago. He might not even be alive anymore. On the news, military experts were discussing humanity's chances. The tone was not optimistic. Admiral Blake appeared on screen, looking tired but determined. She explained that the fleet would do everything possible to defend Earth, but people should prepare for the worst. The hegemony fleet was led by Overlord Thexmon, a creature that had once been called Velkari before his species was absorbed into the hegemony hierarchy. He was tall and thin, with pale skin and cybernetic implants that enhanced his natural abilities. His bridge was a dark place filled with the conquered representatives of dozens of species, all serving their hegemony masters. Report, Thexmon commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. The human fleet is taking defensive positions around their homeworld, Overlord, reported his tactical officer, a being whose original species name had been forgotten centuries ago. 43 ships total, primitive weapons and armor. They will not present a significant challenge. Intelligence. Assessment. The humans appear to be a standard Type 7 emerging civilization. Single planet origin, early space technology, no significant allies. Standard conquest protocols should be effective. Thexmon nodded. He had overseen the absorption of 17 different species into the hegemony. Young civilizations always followed the same pattern. First they would fight, then they would try to negotiate. Finally, they would surrender when they realized resistance was hopeless. The humans would be no different. Begin the final approach. Transmit surrender demands on all frequencies. Give them one chance to submit before we demonstrate our power. The hegemony message was broadcast throughout the solar system. The alien voice was cold and mechanical, translated into human languages by sophisticated computers. People of Earth, you have been selected for incorporation into the hegemony. Surrender your military forces and prepare for integration. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. You have 6 hours to comply. President Martinez called an emergency session of the Global Council. Representatives from every nation gathered in the crisis chamber beneath Geneva, their faces reflecting the impossible choice they faced. Fight and likely face extinction, or surrender and lose their freedom forever. What are our options? Martinez asked Admiral Blake, who had joined the meeting by video link from her flagship. We can fight, Madam President. My fleet will give everything we have. But the numbers are not in our favor. Even if we destroy half their ships, they will still have enough firepower to devastate Earth. And if we surrender? Based on intelligence reports from other systems, surrendering species become slaves. Their technology is absorbed, their people are used as workers or soldiers for the hegemony. Some individuals might survive, but human civilization as we know it would end. The debate that followed was heated but brief. In the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would fight. Jake Morrison watched the news coverage with his family, feeling helpless and frustrated. He was an engineer, not a soldier. There was nothing he could do to help the fleet prepare for battle. But as he listened to the experts discuss humanity's slim chances, he found himself thinking more and more about the crystal device. I am going to get it, he said suddenly. Get what? Lisa asked. The crystal. I want to look at it again. Jake went to his workshop and opened the old wooden desk he had inherited from his grandfather. The crystal device was in the bottom drawer, wrapped in a piece of cloth. It looked exactly the same as it had 20 years ago, perfectly clear and glowing with its own soft light. As Jake held the device, he remembered Veltar's urgency when giving it to him. The alien had seemed so insistent that Jake understood its importance. He had pointed to the crystal, then to Jake, then made that gesture that looked like someone calling for help. "If you ever need help," Jake said quietly, remembering his interpretation of Veltar's actions. "But that was so long ago, you probably do not even remember me." Amy appeared in the workshop doorway. "Dad? What are you doing?" "Just thinking about an old friend, someone who might be able to help if he is still alive." "The alien who gave you that thing?" Jake nodded. "His name was Veltar. He was injured and alone, and I helped him repair his ship. When he left, he gave me this crystal and tried to explain that I should use it if I ever needed assistance." "So why do not you try it?" Jake looked at his daughter, surprised by the simple logic of her suggestion. "Because it has been 20 years, Amy. Because I do not know if it even works. Because I do not want to seem like I am asking for payment for something I did out of kindness. Dad, there is an alien fleet about to destroy Earth. This does not seem like the time to worry about being polite." Jake stared at the crystal device, feeling its slight warmth against his palm. Outside, humanity's fleet was preparing for a battle. They could not win. Millions of people were praying for a miracle they had no reason to expect. Maybe it was time to find out if old debts could still be collected. Jake Morrison sat in his workshop staring at the crystal device in his palm. The news broadcasts from Earth were getting worse by the hour. The hegemony fleet had entered the outer solar system and was moving steadily toward Earth. Admiral Blake's ships were in position, but everyone knew it was hopeless. "What do I have to lose?" Jake whispered to himself. He pressed his thumb against the crystal's smooth surface. The device immediately began to glow brighter. Jake felt a slight vibration, and then the crystal became warm in his hand. For a moment, nothing else happened. Then Jake heard a sound like distant music growing louder and more complex. The crystal was singing. "Dad, what is that noise?" Amy called from the next room. "I think it is working," Jake called back, amazement in his voice. The crystal's song lasted for about 30 seconds, then faded to silence. The device went back to its normal soft glow, but Jake could tell something had changed. The crystal felt different somehow, as if it had completed its purpose. Light years away on Zephyr Prime, alarms began sounding throughout the High Command Center. Fleet Admiral Veltar Kess was in his quarters, reading reports from the frontier, worlds, when his aide burst through the door without knocking. "Admiral, the human debt signal has been activated," the young officer said breathlessly. Veltar dropped his datapad and stared at his aide. "Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. The signal came from the Sol system, from the third planet's moon, Luna City specifically. The signature matches the debt marker I gave to Jake Morrison 23 years ago." Veltar felt his 4 hearts beating faster. After all these years, the human who had saved his life was calling for help. "What is the situation in human space?" "Long-range sensors show a large hostile fleet approaching Earth. Over 200 ships of unknown configuration. The humans appear to be preparing for battle." Veltar was already moving toward his command center. "Signal all fleet commanders. I want every available ship ready for immediate departure. Contact the High Council and inform them that the human debt is being called." "Sir, even our entire fleet might not be enough against 200 enemy ships. Should we not assess the situation first?" Veltar stopped and looked at his aide with eyes that burned with determination. "Lieutenant, 23 years ago, a human named Jake Morrison saved my life when he had no reason to help me. He shared his food and water when his own supplies were limited. He risked his safety to repair my ship. He asked for nothing in return. Now he needs help and we will provide it." "Yes, sir." "But Admiral, what if our fleet is not sufficient?" Veltar thought for a moment, then made a decision that would change galactic history. "Send messages to all our allies. Tell them the story of Jake Morrison. Tell them about the human debt. Ask them to stand with us." The message that went out from Zephyr Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not a call for military alliance or trade partnership. It was a story about kindness and honor, told by a species known for their warrior pride. The first to respond were the Harmonians, a species of crystal-based beings who communicated through music and valued beauty above all else. Their leader, the songkeeper Lyra Tell, had heard the tale of Jake Morrison many times from Zephyrian traders. "The human story moves us deeply," she transmitted to Veltar. "Such pure compassion creates harmony in the universe. We will sing our ships to war in defense of this Jake Morrison and his people." Next came the Corvani Republic, pragmatic traders who had been fighting the hegemony expansion for decades. Admiral Kektol of their fleet was blunt in his response. "We care little for your honor debts, Zephyrian, but if this hegemony fleet is threatening the humans, they will threaten us next. Better to fight them now with allies than wait for them to come for us alone. Our ships will join you." The response that surprised Veltar most came from the Void Dancers, mysterious beings who rarely involved themselves in galactic affairs. Their message was brief, but clear. "The human Jake Morrison represents something rare in this universe. We have observed his species for many cycles. They possess a quality we value highly, the ability to act with kindness toward strangers. We will emerge from the deep void to protect this gift." Within 12 hours, the largest Alliance fleet in recorded history was forming at the Zephyr Prime rally point. 67 Zephyrian warships formed the core, their sleek blue hulls gleaming in the light of their home star. Around them gathered ships from a dozen other species. The Harmonian vessels looked like living crystals, their transparent hulls singing with audible music as they moved. The Corvani ships were practical and heavily armed, built for serious warfare. The Void Dancers arrived in ships that seemed to bend light around them, barely visible even when you looked directly at them. But more ships kept coming. The Tekmari brought their swarm fighters, thousands of small craft that moved like schools of fish. The Ancient Watchers sent a single massive vessel, a ship so old that its origins were lost to history. Even the isolationist Tree Singers sent representatives, their bioships growing and changing shape as they flew. In total, 312 ships from 23 different species gathered to honor a debt owed to one human engineer. Admiral Blake was on the bridge of the Valiant when her sensor officer reported the impossible readings. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures appearing throughout the system. Multiple ship contacts, hundreds of them." "What?" Blake moved to the sensor station. "Show me." The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Ship after ship was appearing, seemingly from nowhere. They were not using jump points or any technology, Blake recognized. They were simply materializing in space around Earth. "Are they hegemony reinforcements?" Blake asked, her heart sinking. "No, Admiral. These signatures are completely different. And, Admiral, they are forming up between us and the hegemony fleet." Blake stared at the display in amazement. The unknown ships were arranging themselves in a massive defensive formation. Their combined firepower readings were off the charts. "Admiral, incoming transmission. It is directed specifically at you. Put it through." The main screen flickered, and Blake found herself looking at an alien face she had never seen before. The being had pale blue skin, 4 arms, and large black eyes that seemed both ancient and kind. "Admiral Blake, I am Fleet Admiral Veltar, Kess of the Zephyrian Alliance Fleet. We have come in response to a debt signal from Jake Morrison of Luna City. Are you in communication with this human?" Blake's mind reeled. "Jake Morrison, the engineer, what does he have to do with this?" 23 years ago, Jake Morrison saved my life when I was stranded and injured. He showed me kindness without expecting any reward. Now he has called upon the debt marker I gave him, and we have come to honor that debt. You are here because of Jake Morrison. We are here because Jake Morrison represents the best qualities of your species. His act of compassion has earned him allies across the galaxy. Admiral Blake, please inform Mr. Morrison that his old friend Veltar has not forgotten his kindness." Blake could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Admiral Veltar, there are over 200 hegemony ships approaching Earth. They demand Our surrender, or they will destroy our civilization. Veltar's expression hardened. The hegemony will find that humanity is under the protection of the Galactic Alliance. We have 312 ships from 23 different species, all because one human chose kindness over indifference. On Luna, Jake Morrison was watching the news coverage with his family when the report came in about the mysterious fleet. The broadcaster was struggling to make sense of the readings, talking about unknown ships appearing throughout the solar system. Then Admiral Blake appeared on screen, standing on the bridge of her flagship with tears in her eyes. Citizens of Earth, I have extraordinary news. We are no longer alone in this fight. A massive Alliance fleet has arrived to defend our world. They have come because of the actions of one man, Jake Morrison of Luna City, who showed kindness to a stranded alien many years ago. Jake felt his knees go weak. Lisa grabbed his arm to steady him. The alien commander wishes to speak with Mr. Morrison, Blake continued. Jake, if you are watching this, your friend Veltar remembers what you did for him. He has brought help. The screen changed, and Jake found himself looking at a face he had not seen in over 20 years. Veltar looked older, with more scars and deeper lines around his eyes, but those large black eyes were unmistakable. Hello, old friend, Veltar said in perfect English. I told you once that my people do not forget debts of honor. Today you learn that this is true. Your kindness to a stranger has earned you allies beyond counting. The hegemony will not harm your people while we draw breath. Jake sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. His simple act of compassion, performed without thought of reward, had somehow grown into this impossible alliance. Amy hugged her father tightly. Dad, you saved the world. Jake shook his head, still staring at Veltar's image on the screen. I just helped a friend who was hurt, that is all I did. But as he watched the reports of ships gathering in Earth's defense, Jake began to understand that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have the largest consequences. Overlord Thexmon stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display with growing disbelief. Where there had been empty space just hours ago, there were now hundreds of alien ships arranged in perfect formation between his fleet and Earth. Analysis, he demanded, his cybernetic implants flickering with data streams. His tactical officer's voice was strained. 312 vessels, Overlord. Multiple species configurations. Power readings are significant. Some of these ships are more advanced than our own. Thexmon's pale face darkened with anger. Impossible. Intelligence reports indicated the humans had no significant allies. These must be mercenaries or opportunists hoping to profit from our conquest. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. Put it through. The main screen activated, showing the face of a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms and large black eyes. When the being spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. I am Fleet Admiral Veltar Kess of the Zephyrian Alliance. You will withdraw your forces from this system immediately. Thexmon laughed, a cold sound that echoed through his bridge. I am Overlord Thexmon of the Hegemony. We do not take orders from anyone. Withdraw now, or be destroyed along with the humans. The humans are under our protection. They have earned our friendship through acts of honor and compassion. You will not harm them. Friendship? Thexmon sneered. The hegemony conquers through strength, not sentiment. Your ships may outnumber ours, but we have conquered 73 star systems. We know how to fight. Veltar's expression remained calm. Then you know when you are outmatched. This is your final warning. Thexmon cut the transmission and turned to his fleet commanders. All ships, prepare for battle. Target the largest, alien vessels first. Show them the price of interfering with hegemony expansion. The hegemony fleet moved forward in attack formation, their dark ships bristling with weapons. For a moment, it seemed like the galaxy was about to witness the largest space battle in recorded history. Then the Void Dancers struck first. The mysterious ships seemed to fold space around themselves, appearing instantly among the hegemony vessels. Their weapons fired beams of pure darkness that cut through enemy hulls like they were made of paper. 3 hegemony destroyers exploded before anyone could react. The Harmonians followed with their own attack. Their crystal ships sang a note, of such pure destruction that it shattered the shields of a dozen enemy vessels. The sound carried through space itself, a deadly music that turned metal into dust. Veltar gave the signal, and the entire Alliance fleet opened fire at once. The space around Earth lit up like a new sun. Energy beams of every color imaginable crossed the darkness. The Zephyrian ships fired their plasma cannons, sending streams of blue fire into the enemy formation. The Corvani vessels launched volleys of kinetic missiles that struck with the force of small asteroids. The ancient Watcher ship fired a single beam of golden light that passed completely through 4 hegemony vessels, leaving perfect holes in their hulls. The Treesinger bioships released clouds of living metal that swarmed over enemy ships and began eating through their armor. Admiral Blake watched from the bridge of the Valiant, hardly able to believe what she was seeing. The hegemony fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming just hours ago, was being torn apart by the Alliance forces. Fleet Admiral Veltar is requesting permission to bring Jake Morrison aboard his flagship, her communication officer reported. Granted immediately, Blake replied, and send my personal shuttle to Luna to pick him up. On Luna, Morrison was putting on his best suit while his family watched the battle coverage on the news. The reporters were struggling to describe what they were seeing. Ships that seemed to be made of living crystal were fighting alongside vessels that bent light around themselves. It was like watching a war between gods. "Are you nervous, Dad?" Danny asked. Jake straightened his tie and looked at his reflection in the mirror. He was 51 years old, a simple engineer who had spent his life fixing broken machines. Now he was about to meet with the commanders of the largest fleet in galactic history. Terrified, he admitted, but Veltar is an old friend. At least, I hope he still is. Lisa kissed him gently. You will be fine. Just be yourself. That is who he remembers. The shuttle ride to the Zephyrian flagship took 20 minutes. Jake spent the time looking out the window at the massive alien vessels surrounding Earth. Each ship was a work of art, designed by species he had never imagined. It was beautiful and overwhelming at the same time. The Zephyrian flagship was called the Honor's Edge, and it was the largest ship Jake had ever seen. The shuttle bay alone was bigger than most human vessels. Zephyrian crew members lined the corridors as Jake was escorted to the bridge, all of them standing at attention as he passed. The bridge was a curved chamber with displays showing the ongoing battle. In the center stood Veltar, looking exactly as Jake remembered, but older and more distinguished. When he saw Jake, the alien's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of welcome. "Jake Morrison," Veltar said, walking forward with obvious emotion. "My old friend, you look well." "So do you," Jake replied, feeling awkward in the formal setting. "Though I have to say, this is a bit more dramatic than I expected when I pressed that crystal." Veltar laughed, the same musical sound Jake remembered from their first meeting. "You called for help, we answered, it is that simple. But all these ships, all these different species. How did you convince them to come?" "I told them your story, Jake. I told them about the human who saved a stranger without asking for anything in return. That story has spread across the galaxy over the past 20 years. You are famous, my friend." Jake looked around at the alien bridge crew, all of whom were watching him with what looked like respect. "I am not famous, I am just an engineer who fixes things." "You fixed more than my ship that day," Veltar said quietly. "You fixed something broken in how species see each other. You showed that kindness can exist between strangers, even strangers from different worlds." On the tactical display, the battle was clearly turning in the Alliance's favor. More than half the hegemony ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remainder were trying to retreat, but the Void Dancers had surrounded them and were systematically eliminating any vessel that tried to escape. "Sir," a Zephyrian officer reported, "the hegemony commander is requesting to surrender." Veltar looked at Jake. "This is your moment, old friend. What should we do with them?" Jake thought for a moment. "Can we be sure they will not come back? If we let them go, they will tell other hegemony fleets about what happened here. Word will spread that humanity is protected by a galactic alliance. It should discourage future attacks. Then let them go. but make sure they understand that Earth is off limits." Veltar nodded and gave the order. The surviving hegemony ships were allowed to retreat, but not before their commander was forced to formally acknowledge human sovereignty and promise never to return. As the enemy fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Jake found himself surrounded by alien commanders from dozens of different species. They had all come to meet the human whose kindness had inspired their alliance. The Harmonian songkeeper Lyra Tell spoke first, her voice like wind chimes. "Your story brings harmony to the chaos of space, Jake Morrison. We are honored to have fought for your people." Admiral Kektal of the Corvani was more direct. "You showed wisdom in helping a stranger. Wisdom is rare in the galaxy. We would be pleased to call humans our allies." The representative of the Void Dancers said nothing, but somehow Jake felt their approval like a warm presence in his mind. 3. Months later, Jake Morrison stood in the assembly hall of the newly formed Galactic Alliance headquarters on Luna. He wore the simple blue uniform of an Earth diplomat. Though he still felt more comfortable in engineering coveralls, President Martinez had appointed him as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Alliance, a position he had tried to refuse several times. But Veltar had insisted that Jake was the only human the Alliance would accept in that role. "You are the bridge between our peoples," Veltar had explained. "Your character is known and trusted throughout the galaxy. Who else could speak for humanity with such moral authority?" Now Jake watched as his daughter Amy graduated from the new Galactic Flight Academy, where human pilots learned to fly alongside alien crews. His son Danny was studying alien engineering techniques, fascinated by the new technologies humanity was being given access to. The galaxy was a different place now. Trade routes that had been dangerous were now protected by Alliance patrols. Human colonies were expanding rapidly with alien assistance. Most importantly, humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Jake often thought about that day in the asteroid belt when he had found Veltar's damaged ship. If he had followed regulations and called for official help instead of acting on his own, none of this would have happened. One small act of kindness had changed the course of history. "Grandfather." "Jake," a small voice called out. Jake looked down to see Amy's 3-year-old daughter Sarah tugging on his uniform. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Mommy says you saved the world. Is that true?" Jake knelt down and picked up his granddaughter, looking out the window at the ships from a dozen different species docked at the Luna station.